Hello, my name is Paul Barnett, the host of the Great Coaches podcast. Today, here I am at the Melbourne Cricket Ground in Victoria, Australia, and I'm going to share a video with you that looks at the way great coaches help their athletes reframe their thinking. Mental reframing is important because it can lead to a mindset shift, and a mindset shift can then lead to behaviour change. To look at the way great coaches help their athletes reframe their thinking, we're going to use video from the more than 200 great coaches we've interviewed on the podcast. The video comes from Zoom, so some of it is not great quality, but the insights that the coaches share are timeless and universal.
Number 1, reframing pressure from a negative experience to a privilege.
When I was about 10 years old, I remember watching the LA Lakers play. In my mind, Magic Johnson was in the team. And in the dying seconds of the game, the scores were close. And I remember the commentator saying, in situations like this, some players want the ball while others walk away from the ball. And I remember thinking, with the chance to win the game, who wouldn't want the ball? But now, 40 years later, and having worked in multiple countries around the world, I realised that in pressure situations, not everybody steps forward. And in fact, quite often, you won't be able to tell what type of people in your team are those that are going to step forward in those pressure situations. Great coaches reframe pressure as something that you have deserved because of the hard work you've put in to allow you to get to the position that you're in. They talk about it as being a privilege, something that is deserved, and something that the individual should embrace, not necessarily walk away from. To illustrate this point, here is the American basketball coach, Brenda Kirkpatrick Brown.
One of the quotes I love, and you've heard this one before, it's from Billie Jean King, is pressure is a privilege. It comes only to those who earn it. So I talked about that with our kids. If you're feeling pressure, if you're in a situation where there is external pressure. Now, I want to be specific on this, Paul. This is more the external pressure that comes from expectations, from outside expectations. Because we all can feel pressure internally from the pressure and expectations we have of ourselves. But if you have external pressure, people are watching and people have an expectation. That means your program is improving and the stage is increasing, the platform is increasing. And so that's what Billie Jean King, I think, I haven't had a conversation with her about this. I think she is implying that when you're on that stage at Wimbledon, or you're wherever you are, you're in the NBA finals, you're in the championship game at the free throw line, people are watching, and this shot is for the championship. You've earned it, and that's a privilege. And so I tried to get our players comfortable with that. Hey, we won. This is a good thing. Now, you don't want to internalize that because there's that balance that can also just get you off your focus of what you're trying to do. But to be in environments where others perceive, ooh, this is a high pressure situation. Wow. That's where we want to be.
Another variant of pressure as a privilege comes from Bob Bowman, the coach of the greatest Olympian ever, the swimmer Michael Phelps. And here he talks about a lesson on privilege that he first picked up from the iconic swimmer Ian Thorpe.
One of the things that I told Michael was a quote I stole from Ian Thorpe. I saw he gave in an interview when he was at the height of his career. And he said, they asked him about pressure. What do you think about all this pressure that's on you? And he said, I look at it like this. If you look at it from a negative standpoint, it's pressure. But if you look at it from a positive standpoint, it's support. A lot of people care about what I'm doing and are interested in it. And I always told Michael that, and I think that was a good way to look at it too. The reason there's pressure is because people care about it and they're interested in it and in what you're going to do. So if you can channel that a little bit, I think it helps as well.
Number 2, reframing discomfort as a place of growth, not something to be avoided.
When you lead people, there will be times when they become emotional. In my instance, it doesn't happen very often, perhaps a couple times a year. And when they become emotional, it's a challenge for you. Do you respond with platitudes, trying to reassure them that everything will be all right, that it'll be okay? Or do you step back, disengage, and give the person room to gather their thoughts and re-establish or refocus themselves? Great coaches use these moments when people are in pain to help them reframe their thinking around the discomfort they're feeling towards something that is necessary for growth and something that actually symbolises their progress. Here is the basketball coach, Joanne McCauley, talking about this.
First of all, there's a presumption here that life is this joyous thing in all the pictures that people put on Facebook. Everybody's happy all the time. But the reality is, the principle is that suffering is part of the deal. And by suffering, you are able to get to the core what the difficulties are. And you feel like feeling pain is a part of life. It is not something you can remove. Life is full of ups and downs, good times. Sometimes it's good times, and then immediately following, it's bad. It's just things you can't believe. You're up, you're down, you're thinking about life. But if you have a measure of faith in the process, if you're a person of faith in general, if you're a person that's spiritual or thinks about things and knows that if you do your very best, good things will happen, but you will suffer. Things will go wrong. You will get injured perhaps. You will get into situations where you have a hard time communicating. You will lose games. You will win games. You will be on the bench. You will be a starter. There's so many roles that you can play. And so I like books that talk about getting comfortable with suffering. And I've had an enormous amount of suffering that I think has developed me in a very strong way. And character comes from that. So we do talk a lot about embracing suffering and joke about it sometimes. Okay, ladies, we are going to suffer through this conditioning, and you can look at it two ways. You can let that suffering take you down and feel weaker because of that, or you can rise and you can get past any suffering despite how you feel when you run around the track or something. You can make it so it's light but palpable or definitely motivational. And so we're comfortable with suffering.
They also take this idea of discomfort one step further by helping people reframe it and see it as something that can be fun. Here is the great rugby union coach, Eddie Jones, giving an example of how he works with this mindset.
It's the ability to be able to teach them that it doesn't always have to be fun and you don't always have to be happy. And at times there are difficult situations, but there's a fun to sticking at something, doing it well, and then achieving. And I think it's almost, you've always got to be conscious of the fact there's a fun there that you've got to let them have. And it's teaching players about how do you find that fun too, how do you understand fun too is something that you've got to stick at. It's going to, at times, going to be uncomfortable. At times, there's going to be bits and pieces where you don't like. And you just keep on trying to find ways to get it through.
Number 3, reframing losing from failure to a valuable learning experience.
The great swimming coach, Michael Bowl, was reflecting on the failure of his own swimming career when he told me this about failure.
One of my favourite sayings is, failure is the fertiliser of success. And I think that to me was something that really triggered something in me. And I didn't know it immediately, but when I decided to start coaching, which was by accident, in 1987, once I had a taste of preparing swimmers for the 88 Olympic selection trials, that was the thing that I knew I wanted to do. I wanted to become a swimming coach, and I've been coaching every year since then.
Reframing failure as a learning experience is perhaps the reframe that great coaches talk about the most. Here is the athletics coach, Frank Dick, talking about this.
Failure should be your teacher, not your undertaker. I thought what a great line that is. Because you see, if you're going to change things in life, Paul, if you're going to push beyond the edge, to go into new territory, to try to change the world, try to change what you do yourself, the chances of failure are pretty great because you've not been there before. It's an uncomfortable ride, isn't it? But the key to that is fail fast and learn faster, right? If you're going to go for this, get out there, take the risk, get into these uncomfortable bits because they will be uncomfortable. And if you're following your nose, get back on your feet fast, learn even faster and move on because you will fail. So failure is not your enemy at the end of the day. It's something there that you can use.
Here is the basketball coach, Brenda Fries, talking about how her team at Maryland University uses failure as a learning process.
I think when you think of a team, sometimes I can point to a moment in a season each and every year where there's a defining moment that moves your team along a path. And that defining moment more times is for the good. Sometimes it changes the path, but those moments are crucial. Sometimes after a really tough loss, you'll learn about your team to be able to fix it and change it. The growth that comes out of it really allows your team to become a lot more resilient.
Number 4, reframing your focus from the result to what you can control.
One of the things I hear great coaches talk about often is the idea of focusing on the process over the goal. And in fact, the ability to reframe people into thinking about those steps is something that they see is both an art and a skill. Here is the field hockey coach, Marcus Weiss, giving an example from Olympic history to illustrate this point.
I think the examples was Lynn Davis. He was a long jumper, and he won a gold medal in '64 and was the big favorite in '68. We all know who won long jump in '68, and no one knows Lynn Davis. I'm sorry to say that, but we all know Bob Beamon because he won, and the competition there was done for every single jumper, and Lynn Davis in '68 was the favorite because in an interview he said, all I could think in 4 years, I'm the favorite and I want to win another gold medal, and that's a success goal. The downside with success goals is there are some factors you can't control that have an influence on success goals. In a team sport, for example, it's the decision making of the refs. Sometimes they just blow bullshit and it's against you, but it has an influence on the outcome of the game. Sometimes you suffer from injuries because some of your key players, he might have a car accident, it's not his fault, but he might have a car accident and he's out for 6 months. So there are factors outside of your own control that have an influence of success goals. And that's the reason why in that book it was promoted to build a second layer of goals, performance goals, and the criteria is, okay, they need to be, by definition, you need close to 100% control over these goals. So you've got technical stuff, you've got tactical stuff, you can do the athletic stuff, you can mental training, nutrition, that's all under your own control. And the better you are there, the more likely it becomes that the success target is also achieved. So you can plan performance, you can't plan success.
Yeah, I think
that made a lot of sense to me. And so as soon as I realized that's a good idea, I started doing that.
One way I often hear this focus on process over goals talked about is through the idea of focusing on what's important now. American football coaches talk about this a lot, and they use the acronym WIN, W-I-N, to illustrate their point. To bring this to life, here is the American football coach, Del McGee.
They really dive into the details. They never look forward into the future. Everything is what's happening right now, what's important now. The WIN acronym is used widely in our profession. And what's important now is something that all those men that I've worked for, the ones that were really good and successful, they really stay in line with that, not looking forward.
Number 5, reframing the focus from the error to the response required.
I remember being in my early 30s when I first read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book is this terrific quote: "Forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess except one thing: your freedom to choose how you will respond to the situation." It's such a penetrating idea, particularly when you're leading people and you're trying to see how they respond to the failure that is so frequent when we go to work every day or when we are in teams every day. Here is the softball coach, Mike Candrea, talking about how he gets people to reframe their thinking when they make an error or when they fruitlessly search for perfection.
How often do we practice failure in a practice situation? And how often do we practice our recovery plan when something happens? Miss a ground ball, when I'm watching kids, I love to see how they react. I don't really care what happens, but I want to see how they react to what happens.
Through the arc of my corporate career, I've learned that quite often what can differentiate people is the way that they respond to a situation. It's something that you can't predict, but what you are looking for is the best response possible from the people you're leading. To give a great example of how a coach can reorientate their team away from the error to the response, here is the UCLA basketball coach, Corey Close.
At the end of this time that you've not had to sit out, so to speak, what do you want to be able to say about your response? What do you want to be able to look back and go, man, I chose to strengthen my R. I chose to respond a certain way. And as a result of those choices, this is what transpired. This was the work I did in the dark that got revealed in the light, so to speak, later on. Sometimes when we all tend to look at our circumstances and go, oh, this is what we can't do. This is what we can do. But when you are committed to your response or discipline over default, you choose to say, okay, where is it that I can grow in maybe an unpredictable way? This event is hard. This event is not what I would have chosen, but maybe it will force us to the uncomfortable places where the real growth and change happens, when you have to make those hard choices that develop deep character and life-changing habits. It's a work in progress. It's an everyday kind of thing. And I also don't believe you can carry it over. I think you got to choose it every day. And you got to go, okay, I'm going to choose to strengthen my R today. I'm going to choose discipline over default, because if I know I am, I'll go back to old habits or comfortable ways, and not a lot of good or growth that happens in comfortable ways.
Number 6, reframing sacrifice as not something you deny yourself, but instead something you do for others.
Phil Jackson is a legendary NBA coach. He's written multiple books and won multiple championships as a coach and as a player. And he had this to say when it comes to teams. Good teams become great ones when the members trust each other enough to surrender the me for the we. The me for the we principle is at the centre of what so many great coaches talk about. It's like a holy grail that they're trying to unlock so that the energy in their team can be more focused and ultimately lead to a better performance. Here is the NBA championship winning coach, Kevin Eastman, talking about the idea of sacrifice they used at the Boston Celtics to unlock this idea of me versus we.
And what immediately came to front of mind, not just to mind, but immediately to the front, was, what am I willing to sacrifice? What am I willing to sacrifice for this group? Because what we define team as when you're working with one or more people. So what am I willing to sacrifice? Because all of us can't do everything we want to do every minute of every game of every year. But we look at sacrifice in two ways. There's the ways that winning teams look at sacrifice. And in pro sports in particular, especially in the NBA, you get into that as a coach and a player ultimately to win something that you can't buy, right? Even though they make all that money, they can't buy the world championship ring that we got in 2008 with the Celtics, right? So it comes down to question number one would be, what are you willing to sacrifice? And if we ask the common person on the street, define sacrifice for us, they would probably say something to the effect of, it's something I give up. And it truly is. You do have to give up something for the betterment of the team. But to take that a step further to what we found the best of the best teams, the ones that really are competing for becoming the best and ultimately become the best, it's not something you just give up. It's also something you do for. It's not just what you give up, it's what you do for a teammate.
Jenny Busek is also an NBA basketball coach. And here she builds on Kevin's ideas by talking a little bit more about the me versus we principle.
The better you are, the better we are, as long as your pursuit of me is for the we. But it was just about how it's not mutually exclusive. Like, we all should be striving to be the best version of ourselves. But, you know, the greatest of the greats understand that everything that we've been given is to give away for the greater good. And that's where the beauty in life really comes. Because it's not about being better than anybody else. It's about being the best version of themselves. And there's a strength and a freedom that comes in that motivation.
Number 7, reframe doubt from something negative to something you embrace.
There is a myth that successful people don't suffer from doubt. Yet, as the psychologist Carol Dweck pointed out in her marvellous book, Mindset, high achievers are not distinguished by unshakable confidence, but by a belief that ability can be developed through effort, even when doubt is present. An example of reframing doubt from something that is negative to something that can be seen as positive comes from the iconic field hockey coach, Rick Charlesworth.
Doubt is good. Doubt's normal. Doubt's as it should be. If you think you know the answers, then you're probably tricking yourself or kidding yourself, and you may be wrong. And so doubt is, if you like, the foundation of all knowledge. It makes us curious. We wonder about whether or not we've got it right. We explore our motivations. We look at our solutions, and we try to develop ways of doing things that are foolproof. So doubt's a good thing. And we all have it. You know, I remember listening to Roger Federer when he was undoubtedly the best tennis player in the world before the Australian Open. It would have been more than a decade ago. And he was saying, I don't know how I'm going to go in the final. It's going to be very hot. I don't know whether my preparation's been good enough. My forehand's not going as well as I. And here's this guy, and he won the final the next day, preparing himself for but he's got doubt. Everybody's got them. The best player in the world has them, but those apprehensions are also one of the things that fires you to compete. And Herb Elliott, our greatest runner in Australia probably, said he ran on his apprehensions. They were the things that fired him. And I think that it's a good thing. And let's face it, in a sporting contest, you can never be sure what the outcome will be.
We interviewed Professor Sergio and Professor Cliff Mallett on their book, Serial Winning Coaches, where they had gone off and interviewed 17 coaches in 10 countries from 10 different sports that had won championships or Olympic gold multiple times. And they, interestingly, found this about doubt.
For me, it was just liberating, especially in the sense of these guys that have won so much, they still felt insecure. We even talked about this idea of the serial insecurity. Despite winning all this, they still doubt themselves. They have a grounded self-belief based on what they've done and how hard they work. But there's always an element of reasonable self-doubt, and that's okay. And I felt that was liberating. Like, if these super coaches can doubt themselves, I can feel a bit uneasy about things, and that's okay. That's part of the whole process. So yeah, that's how it's affected me.
I hope you enjoyed this video and found a couple of ideas that can help you reframe the thinking of the people in your own teams. It's a really powerful tool that great coaches use to help change behaviour, and I think it's something that we can all learn from. If you like today's video, check out our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com, where we have loads of material on leadership and ideas to help you improve the functioning of your own team.